how do people really learn? At A New Spring, we create experiences with leading learning pioneers like Dr. Felipe Hartman, Julie Dirksen, and Lauren Waldman to explore just that and more. Don't miss our next Love to Learn experience, an event series to help and inspire you to create training based on how people learn best. Find out what's coming up at anewspring.com/events.
If you're in workplace learning Technologies 2025 should definitely be on your radar. It's happening 23rd to 24th of April at Excel London, and the scale is huge. 11,000 visitors, 1,000 conference delegates, and a free exhibition with over 200 L&D solution suppliers. The conference theme, People, Technology in the Future, Decision Time, taps into the biggest topics in L&D right now. With 80 expert speakers and 30 sessions, they'll cover AI, skills, personal growth, and practical L&D essentials. Booking opens at the end of January. Check out learningtechnologies.co.uk for more info. One of the golden rules of interviewing is to avoid asking questions that have a simple yes-no answer. A rule you'll see I've breached in the title to this episode, Will AI Wipe Out L&D? Of course, the simple answer to that question is no. Mea culpa, like everybody else, I'm chasing clicks. Fundamentally, however, it's an uninteresting question. The far more interesting, though less algo-friendly query would be, is AI bringing disruptive change to the learning profession and shaping up to deliver a lot more of it in the years to come? That also is a simple answer, and that answer is yes. Here's why.
Welcome to The Learning Hack, a podcast about the people and technologies that are creating the future of learning. I'm John Helmer.
Now guess what?
Learning is cool. Learning is cool. Learning is cool. I'm learning.
Learning is fun.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge. Education.
We've covered AI from a variety of angles on this podcast over the last 5 years, but in this episode, for the first time, we're drilling down into what impact it's having, and will increasingly have, on the practice of learning professionals, especially those in corporate roles, but also in the wider context. To do this, we talk to somebody who has a very hands-on background in implementing projects and is also writing a book about the subject. Who is he?
Hack Facts.
Robert Guidi is a UK-based artificial intelligence expert, strategist and advisor specialising in the application of AI in business and learning. An engineer by background with knowledge in data science and technology policy, he has worked across industries to help organisations navigate the opportunities and risks of AI adoption, most notably perhaps with PwC. Robert is a sought-after speaker and consultant, known for translating complex AI concepts into practical strategies. His work focuses on responsible AI, automation, and the future of work. So, Robert, it's a great pleasure to have you on the podcast. Welcome to The Learning Hack.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and look forward to having a conversation.
Yeah, Robert, I understand you're writing a book about AI and L&D. So I would be feeling in my duty as an incisive podcast interviewer, I wish, if I didn't ask the obvious first question. What makes you think the world needs another book about AI? And implicit in that question as well, it's rather rude, why are you particularly placed to write it? So what in your background do you think gives you a particular perspective that you want to bring to the world with this publication?
Yeah. No, they are good questions, and I'm glad you brought them up front. Another book on AI. Well, I guess there are lots of books, but this is an extremely new and broad field. I mean, I say new, obviously AI, the larger question, has been around for over sort of 80 years. But the generative AI has really kicked off the conversation for everyone, not just the data scientists. So I think it's a big topic. So you kind of need to chunk it down into smaller topics. Once you've understood the overall premise, then you need to sort of work out how it applies to your job. So what I'm trying to do with this book is to help L&D leaders and indeed people leaders and anyone in the C-suite understand how generative AI could really change the game for learners. And we might talk about it a bit later, but I've always been looking at L&D from a point of view of self-serve, because as somebody myself, and this kind of comes onto your second part of your question, someone myself who's been, if you like, a frontline worker. I was a manufacturing engineer at Ford Motor Company installing production lines. I was a consultant in a Big Four as a transactions, merger and acquisitions advisor. So I've been at the front line, so I know what it's like to work under all those pressures where obviously your key role is to be producing or dispatching projects, and the pressure to learn stuff and know stuff is high, but obviously not always easy to achieve. And so AI gives us the opportunity to serve that knowledge to people very directly in the flow of work, if you like, and also potentially give them a coach in their pocket. So you might have heard of AI coaches that allow people to have good advice at any moment of the day. So for me, this is a real opportunity, and I've learned a lot over the last 2.5 years about it, and I'd just like to share that with the world. And really, the punchline of the book is put your R&D goggles on and go out there and experiment. So, R&D goggles meaning this isn't necessarily about return on investment. It's about data gathering. So it's about doing experiments. And the book helps talk you through how do you get to the point where you can do an experiment in a business which traditionally probably isn't well set up for such things.
You mentioned your background as an engineer there and production lines for Ford, and that's making me think, I wonder if that background gives you a view on the automation of industries, which obviously is the theme with AI. We're beginning to automate kind of white collar work now, but something that's happened in car factories. I know this because a while ago, one of the weird jobs I had is writing a factory tour for a car manufacturer in the north, and looking around the factory, and it was really noticeable that different parts of the factory, particularly in the bit where they kind of actually weld everything together, 60% robots. And then there was automation in all parts of the factory that had crept in since, anything I knew about car manufacturing. But particularly in certain parts of it, there were more robots than humans in there. So that is a process that's happened in manufacturing that of kind of physical things that must have been very obvious to you as it happened. Does that give you any kind of perspective on what's happening with AI automating bits of human work when it comes to the more white collar functions?
I think it has. I'm not a sort of a manically crazed person who wants to kind of replace humans with machines at all. I am more coming at it from a kind of problem solving aspect, that actually if we put these tools in order, and that may be a combination of humans and machines, then we can get stuff done and achieve what we're trying to achieve here. Yeah, which in this case is getting the knowledge to the person when and where they need it. Then that's all to the good, really. I think, it's about enhancing that human experience. I mean, you look at, for example, email. Well, email is just the automation of delivering, writing and delivering a message to someone in another part of the business. That is a kind of automation, right? So automation isn't about robots that have big arms swinging around and putting things together. Automation is about all those technology sort of workflows that we use every day that make our lives what they are today, for better or worse. I mean, we are in a very automated world already. So by no means trying to look for ways of eliminating the human. It's just that, for me, the end goal of serving the learner and getting the knowledge they need when they need it is worth studying. And if we can improve that process, if you like, then that's all to the good.
Yeah, I think what I really meant with what's really getting at with that question is something that I see people talking about a lot on LinkedIn is the human element of work. And, there is this kind of narrative about the great, a great replacement narrative about how, AI is here to take your job. But people who know anything at all about it know that it's much more likely to be, for at least in the short term, an assistive technology that helps people, and that we will have to learn to interact with this technology to get the best out of it, and so on. And that's what you see in the car factory as well. I mean, in the bits of the factory where they are fitting out the cars, putting in dashboards and things like this, you would have a degree of automation with things like the heavy lifting and so on. So there'd be a kind of robot arm to help you out. And I think this is what people are really interested in knowing about, is how are we going to work alongside this new technology? Is that something that your book is going to enlighten us about?
I guess, I mean, it's a short book. It like I said, it really focuses on that, using generative AI to improve the learner experience. But I suppose you can't avoid thinking about the implications it has for our working future. I must say that my own kind of attempts to see into the future very quickly become very blurry. It's almost impossible to sort of see beyond, like you say. Let's say that in the short term, we're using generative AI to kind of get our admin done more quickly, and perhaps as a thought partner, and maybe more AI is being used in our workflows and in our software and in our tools. But we're basically doing the same thing, but just more efficiently, and we get to go and have a coffee with our mentor more frequently because we're sort of that much more efficient. We've got some spare time. I think you get to that point and you think, well, that's I can sort of see how that rolls out. But then, in terms of if processes start getting automated and like you say, the robot arm did put out of work a certain class of workers, they then went on to find other work elsewhere. And then when you start thinking about those movements of large numbers of people, it begins to get very cloudy very quickly in terms of where the work will move and what will come next. So, I mean, I am fascinated by it, and there is an engineering sort of streak in there. But I suppose for me, the engineering streak is more about the problem-solving kind of attitude of just keeping going and trying to understand the problem and breaking it down. That's really where my engineering kind of vision comes in.
Refreshing lack of futurology going on here, which is good. Your pitch to me for this episode, zooming in on the learning kind of theme here, your pitch to me for the episode was AI as an existential threat to L&D. In other words, will AI eliminate L&D? Leaving aside the clickbait potential of that headline, can you dig into why you think it is a threat to the function that, despite the incursions of learn tech and ed tech within the last 2 decades or so, has always been so people-driven?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. It is slightly clickbait. There's a law, or a kind of a jokey law about journalists, and any headline that ends with a question, the answer is going to be no, because it's just like you say, a clickbait question, which essentially can't be proven, but it gets people to read. Will this be the end of L&D? Well, no. But I guess it's both a threat and an opportunity, because I think for the L&D folks who see generative AI as a way of unlocking coaching and learning in the flow of work, which traditionally we haven't been able to reach because of the technology just hasn't been there to do it at scale. It's been uneconomical to reach people through a vast number of coaches, and a vast number of kind of resources which are there on tap. So L&D has the opportunity to kind of own that, if you like, to put it parochially, to sort of spread across that new realm, which heretofore hasn't been really available. So that's the massive opportunity. But if we don't do that as L&D, then we will sort of get put in that bucket of, well, they're the guys that do the sort of, the face-to-face courses and the compliance sort of thing. And we get boxed into that. Now that of itself is not a threat, but we still need to, as you will know, and you'll read this every time you sort of open LinkedIn or any other discussion about L&D, we do need to get better about valuing that and demonstrating the impact of that. And that's almost like a separate debate. But the question is whether L&D ends up being the bit of the organization that does experiential learning and compliance and those other things that we sort of currently do, or whether it begins also to then work for the coaching and in the flow of work. Because the risk is that if you're a sales director in a company and you go to a trade fair and you see there's an AI powered sales coach, and you go ahead and you buy that, you place an order, well, you've just cut out the L&D team, and that salesperson is going to say, my numbers have just doubled because of this coach. And therefore the C-suite would be then big think, okay, so AI tools are not through L&D, they are direct. We're going to solve our own problems. Your manufacturing engineer buys some sort of video system that watches someone work and it gives it a health and safety report. I mean, that's not far away, but that could have been an L&D sort of like function, whereas now that leader has gone direct to the market and solved his own problem or her own problem. So those are the two sort of extremes I think that I see. L&D either kind of really own this and sort of master it and become the conduit for it in a value add sort of way, or they become kind of squeezed down to a smaller box, which although that may not be a bad thing, because we can really do a lot more with that sort of that end of the spectrum. And that's really the sort of the choice. It's a choice that our organizations and our leaders will make through probably over the actions they take over the next 1 or 2 years in this field.
Is this a kind of version of the joke we see quite a lot on social media, people saying that, I thought AI was going to come along and do all the grunt work for me so that I could spend my time talking to friends and reading improving literature. And it looks like is actually going to happen is AI is going to write poetry and talk to my friends, and I'm going to have to do all the grunt work myself and even more grunt work. But just to keep the thing going.
It sometimes feels like that, but I think in this area that's not the case at all. Because I think basically what I'm proposing is that AI unlocks things like coaching for everyone and on-the-job training, which we haven't had before. So there aren't a team of humans out there doing those roles and enjoying the sort of humanity of it that are somehow going to get washed away. This is not a kind of like a zero-sum game of L&D having to take a back seat. This is actually just an additional layer of support that we can give our people. So yeah, I don't think in this case that AI is sort of eating our lunch. It's more that AI is just going to give us this additional benefit.
In your view, AI presents an opportunity for L&D to get more heavily invested in the 70-20-10 way of viewing the world. I won't necessarily bother to do an explainer on 70-20-10. I'm going to assume that everybody knows what that is, and Charles Jennings and all his marvellous works on. How exactly do you see AI being used within the 20 and the 70? I get it within the 10. And you're saying that's the bit that it can do, like formal learning, structured classes and learning programs and so on. And that's what it's been set to work on designing already. But how exactly would you see it working within the 20, which I think is social learning, community-based stuff, and the 70, which is learning on the job, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or learning through experience.
Yeah. And just to say, I mean, some people have a bit of a visceral reaction to 70-20-10 and sort of questioning the divisions, the 70% sort of idea. So I would just say that, it's not about the percentages. It's about the fact that, let's say there are different ways that we can engage or different learning opportunities. And one end you've got the formal, and then in the middle, like you say, the sort of social or the coaching. And at the other end, it's more in the flow of work. So let's just sort of, if we just stick to those kind of buckets, if you like. And actually, I think on the formal, you mentioned there how AI can help. Well, I think that's actually where it's almost weakest, because what it does is to let us help build courses faster. So there's the danger that we get sort of just a lot more courses being built. And I think people are already sort of playing that out in their heads and thinking, if I triple my output this year, then doesn't that just mean that I have even more content in my LMS? So I think we're going to get better at using it strategically as a thought partner, perhaps to design better. But I think that will still be very much human led at the formal side, and I think we'll almost be able to close that loop on more content is necessary and better, and we'll be able to focus our teams more on experiential learning and good compliance training that actually has a measurable impact sort of thing. So I think it improves our sort of resource deployment in the formal space, because it takes just some of the workload off us. And then in terms of the other areas, I mean, for me, what the biggest benefit it will give you on the social learning is this idea of a coach, and AI coaching is not sci-fi. It's out there, and there are some companies already who are growing fast and going on stage with big Fortune 500 companies who are full of kind of really good news about how the uptake was massive and the impact has been massive. And so it's not just me sort of saying, in theory, it'd be great to have an AI coach. I'm already seeing in the market that some big companies are seeing real benefits from having AI coaches. Having played with it myself, you do get a real sense of a conversation. And so often I think we feel that we have a question, but we don't want to talk about it with anyone. There's an element where, I mean, it's a mixed blessing, or rather a double-edged sword. The idea of having this private conversation with essentially a robot about personal things. But I do think the upside is that you can talk to it about anything without fear of any kind of, there's no risk there. And people will be then able to talk about a wider range of topics and get advice that comes from approved sources. So coaching is a reality, and it is proving to be beneficial. So that's one of the big areas I think where it can impact on that, what we call the 20 there, the social learning. And then in the flow of work, I suppose, if you imagine the world where you could sort of flick tabs, how you're on your Windows and you just flick tab to a different hub. In my sort of my instinct is that you would have a knowledge hub for, let's say, sustainability. That would be one area. So you'd go to a particular, and it would sort of be branded to have sustainable sort of like colors and wallpaper, and it would be there for you to either do question and answers around the topics, basically chat with your documents, and there'd be a tutor button where it could tutor you on certain topics, a coach, a role play. So if, for example, where the industry I came from, consulting, you could have a role play with a client you're going to go and see tomorrow, and you'd sort of say they're in pharmaceutical and they're the chief sustainability officer, and you want to talk to them about about CPRD. It would then what are the top 5 difficult questions? Let's role play number 3. So you can have that role play all within the same kind of screen. Just imagine there might be some buttons across the top where you choose the different modes, and then ping up in the top right, you've got a notification saying, "Oh, John, because of where you are in the business, we'd like you to do this challenge." And the challenge is essentially like a conversational e-learn. So where previously you might have flicked through 30 slides of e-learn and then done a multiple choice question, a conversational e-learn might be, a page of content. And then what do you think the top 3 things are? And then you'd have a conversation about content that you just absorbed. So you can see how already you're getting personalized level of learning, and you're going to get some instant feedback. So that feedback loop is super short, and you're instantly fixing your preconceptions. And then sort of the next level then is that you can then start to potentially, and ethically, I suppose there's a big discussion to be had here, but could sort of say, well, John's came in and he answered a couple of questions. He was clearly a bit of a novice. I'd give him a 3 out of 10. And then, but by the end of it, he got to a sort of a 7 out of 10. And then maybe in 6 months' time, you could ask similar questions and say, oh, John's dropped back to a 4 out of 10, or he's gone to a 9 out of 10 because he's clearly using this in his everyday work. So in the same way that in higher education and in school education, AI is being used to grade papers, if you like, and this is an established kind of, there's quite a lot of science around this. We could begin to use LLMs to genuinely get a measure of how somebody has moved along a certain spectrum, using LLM to grade people in that sense of novice, intermediate, or expert levels. So I think for me that those are the 3 main areas. It's sort of supporting you with content, not doing it for you. It's a coach in everyone's pocket so that you can sort of have that experience and have the benefit of a coach. And then there's this kind of hub where you can go to have all kinds of different modalities to get into the content, either even just for a quick answer or to follow your nose and do some deeper thinking.
If you're looking to connect with the top minds in learning and talent, there's no better place than an Iventive event. That's IVENTIV. Since 2009, they've hosted nearly 300 interactive conversational events exclusively for senior leaders like global heads of learning. I've been a sponsor myself and found these events invaluable. Less about sitting and listening, more about real, impactful conversations. It's an unmatched opportunity to collaborate with leading chief learning officers on the challenges they're tackling today. Join the conversation. Visit iventive.com/learning-hack. That's iventive.com/learning-hack.
So are we talking here about generic tools or about custom design sort of learn tech bits of software in this case? I mean, the idea of me being judged by ChatGPT I find a bit troubling.
No, quite, yeah. So, I know, like I said, that's somewhere where we sort of have to proceed with caution, but I think there's already a lot of work being done in education around this, and that if you supply the model answer, I believe it's called like the rubric, then it can compare very, very effectively against the model answer and sort of say which points you hit and which points you didn't. So, but on the question of whether these are generic tools, I think you can demonstrate. I've demonstrated, proved the concept, if you like, and that's one reason why perhaps I feel like I am in a position to be able to write this book, is that for 18 months I worked with my colleagues in the AI experts on actually building retrieval programs that brought that chat with documents and doing conversational e-learn in principle. So you can do them using your sort of generic tools, but there are a lot of research and hard work, and you've got to know what you're doing in terms of testing to make sure that it is safe, and B, they're going to be pretty clunky for the user to, kind of like cut and paste this prompt into here and then upload this document and then start roll. It's all going to be pretty, pretty sort of a bit of a sticky plaster job. So, I think you can do that to prove the concept and to accelerate your own understanding. But equally, there are lots of startups and growing companies out there who are very keen to do pilots, and you will be able to find plenty of partners out there who want to explore. And this brings us to this idea of the co-creating. There are lots of businesses out there who want to explore with clients.
Yeah, so I suppose one of the drawbacks of using generic tools is that you are a small. Very small user base for a very huge company that really doesn't care about what you're trying to do, and the destiny of that company can change. It can go in very different directions. I'm thinking back to the kind of early days of Facebook, when people were starting to tout Facebook as a learning medium, and we should use Facebook to do our learning, and people were starting groups and getting bits of, using a 70-20-10 modality. They were getting, we can do the 20 stuff in this Facebook group and so on. Fast forward a few years, by about sort of 2015, 2016, you wouldn't in 1,000 years think of putting a learning group on Facebook, because the thing had changed beyond recognition. Both as a tool and as a community and so on. And one can envisage similar things happening with OpenAI and what have you going forward.
Yeah. I mean, even at a technical level, there's a thing called model drift. So a task which OpenAI did today
model
really well.
Drift. Sorry, what was that again? Let's pin that one. I'd like double click on that, as they say. Model drift. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. So let me the example. Yeah, the basis is that yesterday you gave it a prompt which may be quite complicated and it executed a task very satisfactorily, but you did it today and it just failed to kind of make the same connection. So the example that I was reading about was obviously on the European continent, they used for numbers, they used commas and decimal points switched round. So if you would get a spreadsheet from Belgium, you might find that the format's sort of all wrong and you need to convert it. Well, throw it through your LLM. That's a language thing. Just get it to reorder it all. And that on day one, that works fine. You run it on day two and it sort of fails to do it. And you sort of think, well, that's total fail. I mean, like, you can't rely on something which one day does a brilliant job, the next day completely fails to do it. So, model drift is one of the, that's what they call it. That things do not always happen the same, irrespective. You think all the constants, the variables remain constant, but there's things going on which you can't necessarily explain.
Yeah, I love the fact that I've now got a 2-word phrase to describe why. I spent a certain portion of yesterday shouting at the screen at ChatGPT for failing to do something which it had done perfectly well the day before, asked with faced with the same prompt. Thank you very much.
Listen, one tip on that is if you kind of encourage it and tell it, you say you can do that, you can do it. I know you can. Try that. I did that. So I had an appointment card from the dentist, and I thought just for fun, I scanned a photo of it to ChatGPT and said, "Can you convert this into a meeting invite?" Because a Google meeting is just a URL with lots of dates and times in the URL. So I say, so I can click it and then it comes on my screen. I can just accept it into my calendar. That sounds fine. And it kind of said, "Oh, I can't connect to your systems and create a Google Calendar." I said, No, I just want the URL. You can do this. And then it did it for me. So, I mean, there's encouragement, and there's also things like you can sort of say, "I'm going to lose my job if you don't do this for me." That apparently is quite effective.
Yes.
Also saying things like, "I'll pay you $200 to do it." That's another thing that apparently moves the needle. So, yeah, a little bit of cajoling might help.
Yeah. Okay. As long as it doesn't then ask for the number of your PayPal account, whatever.
Yeah, the $200 has been taken from your account.
So let's talk about implementation challenges and the practical considerations of integrating AI. In your notes to me, you mentioned data privacy, vendor selection, and change management as things that came into those implementation challenges. Can we talk about each of those? Let's start with data privacy.
Yeah, I mean, data privacy clearly is a massive one. I'm by no means an expert in it. I think the key thing here is, this is like sort of covers all three of these really, is that I think along with approaching this with an R&D mindset, which is to say, we're not doing this for kind of bang for your buck. We're doing this to gather the data. And look, I think there's a good chance you'll get a positive outcome, but you've kind of got to frame it as such. I think you need to, from the start, need to present this to your leadership and say, this is something we're doing. Okay. Now, so on the face of it, this is an AI project, which is great. It's going to convert an AI conversation into an actual AI action that I think we can all agree, is going to be something beneficial. So you start the conversation by saying, let's take AI and make something happen with it, which we think will be positive. I think that starts to open doors, because I think everyone wants to start seeing some real payback from all of this investment. So that then will involve a conversation with your IT people and your procurement people. So you've opened that agenda, and I think, you've really got to get that rubber stamp from a senior leader to say, yep, I'm sponsoring this. This is worth doing. IT, you need to sort of help with this. So I'm saying I'm not a data expert, and it wouldn't help if I just sort of started kind of going about general technicalities, because it's going to be different in every business. What you need to do then, so therefore, is to sit down with your IT guys and girls and sort of have that conversation. And then there's also the legal and risk people who need to be involved to sort of make sure that we're going to enter into this. These are our red lines, and these are the things that we're going to have to discuss. And let's move forward. So, because there's already a lot of thinking being done about this across the business. So, although we probably don't have any real understanding of these issues, other groups have been working just as hard as we have to get their heads around their subject area. So, I think the thing about data privacy, obviously, it's going to be it's a team sport. This whole endeavor is a team sport. So, engaging with your IT, risk, legal people is going to be the way to crack it. But yeah, I mean, I think we've all sort of heard the bullet points around why this is important and what the areas are. But I think how you crack that is going to be specific to your organization. So I think engaging locally is going to be the way forward on that.
So good tips about having the conversation. Yeah, vendor selection.
Yeah, vendor selection, I think like I said, there are a bundle of sort of startups out there and mid-sized companies. And as you know, lots of incumbents sort of who who've put AI stickers all over their work. I think vendor selection, the first step really is what problem are you trying to solve? Do you want an authoring tool, or do you want a coach, or do you want, I've even seen some tools which are kind of like a strategy discussion tool. So you've been given this organizational challenge. What would a learning and development response to that look like? And it's trained to have that conversation with you. So that's right up the funnel there in terms of a strategic conversation. And then you've got your kind of your learning needs analysis, or all those stages that we go through in terms of the production. Then you've got the implementation, which might be a coach, or it might be a conversational e-learn, or whatever it is, the tool itself. You might say, I want to get a coach, or I want to get, a Q&A kind of situation where I can chat with documents. Or it might be in the measurement side as well. We talked about how LLMs could help measurement, but also how about a system which actually connects to other HR data? That's another brand of startup out there. There are people out there sort of saying, we can demonstrate impact because we plumb into your data. And so across that spectrum of the, let's say, funnel of activity where we get to impact, you've got to choose your slice. And let's say you go for coaching bots. Then you go to the market and you select based on, for example, as part of my book, there's a click through to a vendor map. So I'm got a list of AI powered coaching bots in there. So you could select from there, or you're at a trade fair and you're looking specifically for those conversations. So you've chosen your slice of the funnel. You've highlighted 3 vendors, for example, and then you're going to bring them in and you're going to talk to them about the details, and you're going to listen to the great things they say about themselves, and then you're going to cross-pollinate that with the other. So, if someone says, we are really hot on data protection, and you say, well, how do you know that? What do you mean? They say, well, we have data centers, blah, 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 with, armed guards around them, whatever it is. Then you can use that strong point to then quiz the other vendors to sort of say, well, have you got armed guards around yours? And I think there is a learning process that you're going to have to go through, and there's a judgment that you're going to have to make. But I think you get 3 vendors in and have a very robust, rigorous kind of exchange with them to select based on their answers, and I guess to a certain extent who you feel comfortable partnering with. Because, like I said, this is so new that really we don't even know what the different products need to look like. There's sort of like they'll have a platform that they'll say, well, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is that it seems like your answer there, your first response kind of assumes that there is a fixed typology, or at least some kind of taxonomy of these tools. And I've got a lot of experience in this because I've been on the other side of the fence, kind of writing brochures about as a marketing person for vendor companies about the vendor proposition and so on. And I'd see it from the other side as well. I know how confusing it is for buyers to go around those stands at exhibitions and to try and work out just what these people are doing, because the language, it's so full of kind of flim-flam and all that. Yeah. But also, one thing that kind of emerged at one point with it was a problem and then kind of stopped being a problem, was that there just didn't seem to be much of a fixed taxonomy for e-learning tools. We knew there were kind of learning systems and different types of learning tools. To an extent, that kind of got sorted out, and the analysts like kind of Redthread and Fosway and so on did a pretty good job on that. Now it seems with AI, we've got a whole nother load of. It's like somebody's taken another whole load of horse manure and shoved it over the rose patch, and we've got to try and separate the roses from the orchard. All over again. Is there really? Is anybody giving us a kind of taxonomy of AI learning tools?
Well, that's like I said, one thing I've sort of worked on as part of the book is that click through to a map or a landscape of the vendors and where they sit in terms of. I mean, some vendors obviously go across those activities in the funnel. So one vendor might have coaching and Q&A kind of competency. But that's certainly an emerging. That's part of the work I've done. Yeah.
Yeah, Robert, I would say, half an hour into the interview, I think you, for a certain number of people, you will now have sold your book, because having a fixed, a good taxonomy as a buyer for a technology tool area is really difficult. It's difficult to see what all those people are doing. Just before we leave I think those are all really good pieces of advice on vendor selection. Before we leave the topic, for people who are going to go around shows and exhibitions and things like Learning Technologies, Genuflect, the sponsor, this kind of spring and throughout the rest of the year, and we'll go to one stand after another and listen to all these pitches. Do you have a killer question that would help them sort out the wheat from the chaff? In other words, what is really going to sort of separate somebody who knows what they're talking about and doesn't about on this subject?
I think that's a good one. I don't have a killer question. I sort of think there isn't just one dimension that separates the good from the bad. And I get it. For me, the key thing is they're going to come in and do their pitch, and you can react to that, and you sort of say, well, do you know what I need is for the background to be green and to have 5 buttons at the top, not 4. Can you do that for me? And they'll probably say yes, because they're salespeople. And you say, well, can you come and demo that to me in the near future? And if they can't if they're not going to turn up in 2 or 3 weeks' time with something which at least looks like what you've described, then that's when you just sort of got to draw the line, because it's so quick and so easy. We've all heard about how we can now code our own kind of websites in 25 minutes. I know from personal experience that you can change things on the screen very quickly. It's called the user interface, isn't it? This bit on the front screen is now extremely easy to reconfigure. So I think it's kind of hard when you're just having the flim-flam conversation at the stand, but I think you should be able to sort of say, do you solve this problem? Do you actually do AI coaches? Well, no, we don't really. Are you on my list or not? And that's having this laser focus on what problem you're trying to solve. And then when you get 3 that you think are credible to come in, if they are not reversioning what they do for you, then that's the point at which you say, well, look, you've talked about it, but if you can't put it in front of me, then A, I can't really validate it, and B, what does that say about your ability to deliver on my demands, going forward? We are in a unique situation. It's a buyer's market, because there's lots of venture capital money going into this. Everyone's sort of trying to do a land grab in terms of they need to be selling this product. So it's a buyer's market, because there aren't many clients moving on this. And so if you're somebody who's got a small pilot budget, then they will be wanting to get that money. And if they can't demonstrate that they're going to move fast to move mountains to come up with your product, then they're probably not going to deliver.
So change management, the third of those things that we're talking about under implementation challenges.
Yeah. Well, I suppose there are two flavors of this, aren't there? The change management, the wider kind of how do we convert everyone in the business to have a kind of an understanding and a positive mindset to this. That's one aspect of it. Then change management in terms of L&D traditionally has been a slow evolving sort of area where, essentially lots of our stakeholders think of it as a kind of version of school for adults. And that so we go and we get courses, and we have this new thing called eLearns where you can do it on your screen. And maybe you get some, bright young things to do some rather jazzy experiential thing once in a while. But it's kind of a well understood box, rightly or wrongly. People kind of know what they get when they talk about L&D. And like I said, to do this at all, you've got to really change your mindset from, demonstrate to a more R&D mindset, basically. And that's not going to be something which they're going to be expecting from you. But on the other side, every other meeting they have is about how can we innovate, how can we develop new things, how can we convert this investment into a tangible benefit for our people. So that's the change that you've, as L&D folks, have got to engineer as well. It's changing the perception of L&D being the place you go for a course to we're now part of the innovation engine. We're now going to change what we do to really embrace this and make the most of it. So, I mean, if you like, I can talk a little bit about change management on the wider scale, because I have some experience in that. But then there's also the change management at a sort of, a personal, a stakeholder level, changing the way that people perceive you and saying, we are now L&D, R&D, if you like. We're gonna really embrace this.
So discussions of the AI future I see on LinkedIn nowadays always talk about agentic AI. That's an AI that has agency, that can do other things for you apart from just kind of answer questions within a screen, as being the place we're evolving towards. What the implications of this development for L&D as you see it? We had a kind of I did an interview with Nick Shackleton-Jones in this season. You probably would have heard that, but he's very much against letting AI have any agency for you at all. He thinks it's a bad thing. But a lot of people think that agentic AI is the next stage. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I mean, it is the next stage, and agentic AI, it falls for me under the bucket of automation, because it's just basically a process that works from some inputs and turns up with some outputs. I suppose the agentic side is, you say someone has agency when they have, initiative, or they have autonomy to make decisions, basically. So it's the job of the people to putting these processes together to give enough agency to make it useful, but not so much that they then become sort of like the dominant decision-making force. And I suppose we'll make some mistakes along the way, but I think from a purely kind of, let's say, capitalistic point of view, it's a good thing, because it reduces friction, it makes the business process run more smoothly, and that seems to be the oil that keeps the economy growing. So again, my line of sight becomes very fuzzy very quickly on this, because you sort of think, well, automation is a good thing, and reducing friction is what the market needs, and then you start to think on the impact of those things and the potential for harm if agency goes too far. So I got to say, I don't have a fully formed view. I just think it's so hard to sort of see beyond doing what we do now better, and really kind of, apart from me giving you some sort of vague reassurances that I'm sure it'll be fine. I don't think anyone can really say very much about that. But just the example I use for agentic is one where a friend demonstrated that he took some photos whilst he was dropping his child at school of the building, because he was looking at some work with a company that does building services. So he then was able to upload those obviously anonymous photos of the woodland, of the driveway, of the guttering, of the roofing. He uploaded the photos. The agent then analyzed the photos for contents and the state of repair, compared those findings against the kind of list of services that the company could offer, and then generated a kind of a sales letter that would then, sales material that would relate directly to this case from the photos. And I thought that was a really powerful sort of view of what a workflow could look like. Now, is that agentic? It's not very agentic. It didn't have that much of a sort of autonomy. It sort of basically did a few quite well-defined steps, but it demonstrates what we mean by agentic sort of workflows, because there was a degree of autonomy. Which of these services shall I choose? It was kind of a judgment call based on these photos that I think I've looked at. So that's perhaps just a helpful example of what we mean by agentic. The extreme end of that in terms of autonomy might be, and this is already a very hotly debated area, but using AI, for example, for recruitment purposes, I could look at 1 million CVs and kind of make judgments on people, and then spit out a short list of candidates based on what I've seen in all these CVs. That the AI agent could do that. That's already being very much under the microscope specifically around the EU AI Act, as a high risk activity. So regulation is happening. I know we don't. There are some very loud voices against regulation, but there is a sort of counterbalance to that amongst politicians. So we can only hope that we kind of strike a good balance this time round after fiascos of social media, running wild. I think hopefully we've learned some lessons about letting tech make its own rules.
Looking a bit less far into the future, though, what do you think about the actual feasibility, as an engineer, feasibility of doing it in the short term? It seems to me that there are, some obvious things in the way of it happening, which is that it involves kind of linking applications together that don't necessarily particularly want to talk to each other or live in the same universe. I'm a Mac user. There are Microsoft programs on my kit, but I'm not in the Microsoft universe, as it were. I can't necessarily go into an application and say, okay, can you kind of do a spreadsheet about this, that, the other, because it doesn't have the right kind of links to that program. I think I was struck by people's descriptions of using OpenAI's kind of venture into this. Can't remember the name of it. Operator, was it recently? Which I'm not going to shell out £200 for, I'm afraid, because they gave a list of stuff that it could do for you, that none of which things I wanted to do, but they seem to be to kind of depend on them having links with certain other organisations which could book a flight for you or a ticket to the Super Bowl or one of those things. So, I mean, if it's a matter of kind of companies talking to each other, forming alliances, APIs and all that stuff, or it could be done, that just seems like it's incredibly clunky and it's going to take a long time to do. And it reminds me of when Amazon first started. We thought, this is so wonderful. There's a website, you could order a book. But as e-commerce began to develop, it just looked like people talked about the last mile was the tough thing in making this work. And it was a huge effort to bring that stuff into the real physical world, and people who'd been programming computers suddenly had to learn how to sort of set up warehouses and logistics and fleets of vans and all the rest of it, and it's now moved on to the drone world. But surely it's going to be a much bigger endeavor to bring all those things together in a way that makes it into a usable application than it is to sit down and write a load of code that can, write you a CV in the style of Robert Browning or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the internet is something that's been created by for human consumption. If you think of the content, the actual information on your average website is actually could be distilled, quite concisely, but there's lots of flim flam around there, to make it marketing kind of impressive sort of thing. So I think things like Operate are struggling to navigate through websites because there's so much kind of noise that is there for the human and to make that sort of human impact. Whereas the actual information is very much more straightforward. And I think what will evolve fairly quickly is a kind of a machine to machine communication that might happen in the background that allows these things to happen extremely quickly, and where it's mutually beneficial for my search engine to be able to connect to your flight booking service extremely quickly, because I get a happy customer and you get a sale. You guys are going to work on that together and solve that. And to the extent that is a common problem, there are lots of standards around how we communicate digitally, and I won't be surprised, if they quite quickly come up with ways of essentially streamlining that conversation between an agent and a source of information that is totally invisible to the human because it sits in the background. And already they're talking about having a file which sits behind every website that basically does just that. I think it's some sort of payload sort of file that basically tells the AI what they will find on this website and where they will find it. It's kind of like a manifest of what's on there. So I don't, where there are dollars, the same dollars that made Amazon a logistics sort of juggernaut will be put into solving the problem, the relatively trivial problem of how do I make my information discoverable by an AI? And I don't think that will be a problem for long.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And I think what it tells me as well is that you'll need a commercial driver for it. And in the learning world, there isn't always a commercial driver. So, I mean, it's always been the case that kind of learning technology piggybacks on the back of more commercially driven generic tools. Can we talk a little bit about another emerging trend in AI? And there's a lot we could potentially get through, and obviously we can't talk about everything. This other emerging trend in AI and what it might betoken for L&D, small language models. What are they, and what are their implications for learning?
Yeah. Well, a small language model, you won't be surprised to learn, is like a large language model, but much smaller.
Pretty smaller. God, I'm glad I asked that question.
That's all there is. No, I guess why is that significant? I'm just thinking whether we just quickly say how do they make it smaller? You lose resolution. It's a bit like having a raw photo on your SLR and then download it onto your computer and send it on a WhatsApp message. The quality will be totally different. The kind of resolution of the image that goes across WhatsApp will be a fraction of the size of the one that you downloaded from your computer. So it's basically a small language model rounds out all of these locations, if you like. So you might know that language models are basically stores of vectors, which is the position of one word relative to another across billions of parameters, means that you can find connected words because they coexist in this sort of space. Well, if you're noting down the location of that word to 55 decimal places, then that takes a lot more memory. Essentially, it takes up much more computational space than if you just did it to 5 decimal places. And hey, if you did 5 decimal places, would that do you lose much? And it turns out you don't lose a lot. You probably heard about DeepSeek, the latest, the Chinese model, which has challenged OpenAI. One of the things they did was to distill the model to make it smaller and faster. So this is a big area of research. At the moment, you sort of feel like we are just piling on bigger and bigger. I'm just trying to think of an analogy, but the steam train is just getting bigger and bigger. We've got bigger coal traps because we need bigger boilers, and everything's just getting bigger and bigger. Whereas they kind of said,
Elon Musk saying 10x all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to 100x this. We're going to 10x this.
Because on the assumption that the only way to make the train go faster is if we make everything bigger. Whereas DeepSeek has shown us that maybe if we kind of went to a petrol engine, we would be able to kind of go quick. So it's a bit of a jolt for the industry in a good way, because it just shows that we don't need to be burning all of this computational power. So small language models, there they are. They are sort of like a compressed version, maybe slightly lower resolution, but in the same way that WhatsApp photo perfectly does the job of an image. They've made it smaller. Why is that significant? Well, A, it's using much less computational power and energy, so they're cheaper to run and better for the environment, basically. B, they can now sit on your device. You've all heard about how Apple are going to put AI onto the phone. The only way they can do that is by using a small language model. But and what's the impact of that is, they're more secure, because now you can have a small language model maybe even running on your hard drive on your device. So for things like, can you draft me this email? It's a pretty trivial, it doesn't need a high degree of reasoning. It's just a kind of quick task. Maybe that's going to run off a small language model on your machine, and it's always there. Even if the internet goes down, you've still got your language model. It's actually on your device. And B, it's much less power, and the security risk is much lower. So your data privacy and security is much better. So for a lot of reasons, small language models are beneficial. And I think we're going to get into a phase where we'll get much better at choosing the model for the task. according to what the task is, and not just always using the Rolls Royce to do when you just want to go down the shops. You just jump in the mini metro. So, that's really why they're significant, I think, because they make things safer, more security point of view, less costly money-wise and environmentally, and they do the job that you need doing in the moment, and that may be part of the solution to the question we had about data security a while ago. When you're engaging a vendor, if you say, well, how does this all operate? Then they say, well, you put a small language model on your server, then that's going to be a win-win. So they are significant. They're a little bit in the future, but they are going to be a bigger feature, I think.
Behind this as well is am I right in saying there is a kind of wider question about the comparison between the way a large language model learns, which is to boil down everything on the whole internet, millions and millions and millions of bytes of stuff, in order to be able to kind of complete a sentence, where comparison of that with the human brain, which needs far less data to make inferences, and the way that kind of a machine thinks versus the way that humans think, and the development of AI, some people feel, will be to come up with a model that needs less data to make those inferences. Is that relevant?
I know it's totally out of my league in terms of the neuroscience around all this. I do have interest, know that there is a research group looking at how much of a language model would you get if you gave it the same amount of data that a 5-year-old has had, for example. So that would be fascinating to see where we get to. But it does sort of suggest, you kind of instinctively think it's probably going to be pretty crappy. Like you said, we seem to be very efficient at making, you think of the baby trying to learn to speak. They're just sort of doing some babbling, and after 2 years, they're kind of beginning to speak. The amount of data they've consumed, or rather the amount of feedback and training they've done is minuscule. But I think what DeepSeek is illustrating is they very much piggybacked on the big model to produce the small efficient model, and they're being sued, I think, by ChatGPT for that. But that shows that maybe, is it Steven Pinker, I think, with his work in linguistics, sort of the idea that we have an instinctive sort of facility for language. So maybe
Chomsky.
as babies, we arrive with a very much a kind of like a preformed.
That was Chomsky's big breakthrough. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. How does the L&D role evolve over time as AI use becomes mainstream in learning? And now I'm asking you to kind of crystal ball a bit, but looking at the next few steps, maybe.
Yeah, this is something I was thinking about recently, thinking about if you were to sort of divide up what your average L&D team does at the moment in kind of like a bar chart of, there's a bit of marketing, there's a bit of graphic design, there's some video work, there's, you can do all the many things that L&D teams do. And then you have this sort of future state of where they'll be spending their time. I like to think that L&D teams will still be designing really engaging content. It may be more of a kind of a conversational e-learn rather than just a kind of like a static e-learn with a couple of buttons that you can press. It would be like, well, how could we build a really good conversation around this to tease out somebody's understanding about the content? That's a really great challenge to give to an L&D team, So hopefully we'll be spending more time thinking deeply about those conversations that we want to elicit with people based on the new content. And, to a certain extent, testing those, sort of thinking, okay, these 10 people really got it when we use this conversational sort of thread. These 10 over here were still mystified. There's just some really exciting work that you could do by fusing instructional design with conversational. So that's really exciting. Marketing, maybe we'll get better at marketing our content because AI can help us produce personalized, recommendations or whatever. What else are we doing? Experiential training, I think, will become more and more valuable because, in a world where everything's going crazy and everything feels like a big machine, L&D will be an area where we can inject a bit of humanity back into the proceedings and being part of a face-to-face course will be even more of a kind of a prize. So I think we'll be spending more time on building experiential, which delivers something that only recognizing that experiential design, learning delivers something really unique. And that's the thing we don't really make enough of. I think that idea that it gives you confidence in something, or it makes you feel valued as an employee. Those things we shouldn't shy away from are the key benefits, I think, of the face-to-face. So I think it gives us the opportunity to really nail those and improve on that, because it's like CEO says, I want people to feel good about, being part of my team. I want retention going down. So I want you to help fix that with some really good experiences that might be learning orientated, but they're really there to fix that problem. So, I mean, that all sounds very rosy. But I do think that AI gives us, coaches in your pocket, and it gives you answers to all your questions, and tutors and all those other good things additionally. And that means that we can really zone in on what we do well and make the human aspect really more powerful.
So lastly, now that you've got us all fired up about this book and we're all gagging to read it, how long are we going to have to wait before it gets published? What timescales are you working to with this, Robert?
Well, I'm doing something a bit exciting with the launch, which is imminent. And I'll be able to, you can click through to the site in the show notes. I'm doing a Kickstarter launch. Now, Kickstarter is a platform which kind of arose out of maybe the board game industry, where you might say, I'm thinking of building this game. If I can get a certain pledge from donors, I will make the game and send you all a copy. So it sort of it's like a funding platform. And the reason I'm doing that is because you can go and you can simply buy the book, and it's sort of, $5 for the ebook. But then there's also some other, what they call rewards down the side, that allow you to engage more deeply with the content, have one-to-one sessions with me or a group training session. And I'm also doing a cohort-based course around the content of the book, so that we as a cohort can step through this together. We've all got the same challenges around IT and risk and legal, but as a cohort, we can step through this. So you can jump on the Kickstarter page and go anywhere from buying just the ebook to all the way through to sort of one-to-one consulting. So it's all there.
So we'll put that link in show notes. Buy us a $5 and you might get to read the book.
That's right. Yeah. So that's live now, and we'll be running for 30 days. So get in there quick. We're recording now. What is it? Mid-February. But thereafter, there will be links to buy it directly from me.
Okay, marvelous. And it's I think a refreshing change to be talking about a book at this stage, rather than getting somebody as sort of fifth interview on their book tour.
Yeah, well, it is fresh news. So thank you very much for having me on, and hopefully it will sort of address a concern or a desire in L&D folks to understand more about what do we do about all this L&D, the AI stuff.
Yeah, I found it a really interesting discussion, Robert. Thanks very much for giving us time today, and good luck with the launch of the book.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you again.
That's all on the Learning Hack podcast for this time. The Learning Hack is completely independent and transparently funded by sponsorship. If you want to help others find us, please like, follow, rate, review, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice or on YouTube.
The Learning Hack is among the top 5% of shows most listened to globally, according to Listen Notes. And if you think your organisation could benefit from sponsoring the Learning Hack, or from using our knowledge and resources to start your own learning podcast, you can contact me on john@learninghackpodcasts.com. Until next time.
Stay curious, learning people.
Now I finally get it.